Have you ever wondered what the best build might be if you just wanted to do as much sustainable damage as possible every single round, right from round one, without any setup or resources required? I'm talking the quintessential Steve Rogers, Captain America, I can do this all day build. Whether you have one fight a day or 20, whether you have 5 short rests a day or none, as long as you're conscious, you can put out high, consistent damage per round, every round. If so, then you're really going to enjoy today's video. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4 each week I take deep dives into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, theorycraft about them, not necessarily so that I can tell you like the right way to build something, but to explore one potential way to build a character in the hopes of creating something that's both really powerful but also really fun to play. So if you enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I am so glad you're here. So thank you for watching. And my name's Colby. So a few weeks ago, I put out a highest sustained damage at every level video, right? Where I tried to figure out, check it out here if you didn't see that, where I tried to figure out what build would give us the most sustainable damage every round for every level, levels 1 through 5. I'm probably going to turn that into a series and might continue adding levels and maybe do the same thing for like a burst or nova damage, maybe even tanks, though I'm a little less sure on that one. Anyways, every level in that video had a different build, right? Or actually 3 different builds, because I felt like I needed to do some that were like sustainable, sometimes requiring resources or even DM approval, but then at least one for every level that could just serve as like a baseline build that we knew would work every single round forever, no matter what. And while old me would find that build a little bit boring, current me, after years of now building like primarily resource spendy, setup required, sometimes might not work this way every fight or at every table builds, current me found the idea rather appealing. Now, a lot of you have asked me over the years to come up with some kind of like baseline character that we could compare builds to, similar, say, to what my friend Chris Treant Monk does with his like baseline, right? Which is basically a warlock casting Eldritch Blast with Agonizing Blast and the Hex spell active, I believe. I like the idea, but Chris and I calculate damage numbers quite differently. He has a system where he assumes a certain number of combat encounters per day and maybe even a number of short rests, I think, but then also assumes a % hit chance based on character level. I always just try to look at one single combat encounter in the case of sustained damage builds, or even just one single round in the case of nova or burst damage builds, and then assume that we've got access to all of our resources in either case. Very different, right? So for me to come up with a baseline for sustained DPR is like, do I stick with the same assumptions that I always make when I'm doing a character build, that we're just kind of going for one combat encounter here? Or do I try to come up with something that's truly, totally sustainable? It feels like a real baseline would be the latter, right? Something you know you could do every single round, every single fight, no matter what. And that's not something I've ever tried to create a full character build for all the way up to level 17 until today. So yes, it is time to find the baseline. And by baseline, I mean, what is the highest truly sustainable DPR a character could do if they were focused only on doing damage with an eye to not just building for one level, like for a one-shot, but with an eye to being the best I can be at my typical damage report levels, 6, 9, 13, and 17. So I guess we're not talking then about just kind of an average, not necessarily very optimized character to measure baseline, like I would argue that Chris kind of does, but more like an optimized baseline, a not necessarily well-rounded character, but instead hyper-focused on damage baseline. To this end, then, here are the rules I'm going to stick to for this build. Rule number 1, no expendable resources whatsoever. No spells other than cantrips, nothing that I can only do proficiency bonus times per day or anything like that, nothing. 2, no, there's a decent chance my DM might not approve this stuff. No flying races, no backgrounds that provide a power boost, no unofficial non-core D&D 5e material. And then 3, no setup round. I need to be doing full damage right from round 1. Finally, There is one little rub trying to stick to these rules, and it's this. One class in D&D really shines for sustained damage at early levels, as I think that aforementioned best damage build for every level video showed. The Barbarian, right? The problem with the Barbarian, of course, is that they scale about as poorly as any class in the game. Now, it looks like the new Player's Handbook coming out later this year will help fix that, but for now, yeah, if you're playing a low-level campaign, yay Barbarians. If you're going into mid or late game builds though, you're gonna want a multi-class. Or maybe even start with a different class if you know you're gonna go into late game, right? And just like dip Barbarian. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to present two builds today. One for a character that goes up to level 9, and a second that goes from levels 10 through 17, where I always stop my builds, right? They will be quite similar in many ways. The main difference will be that one is mostly Barbarian and one just dips Barbarian later in their career, sacrificing power early for power later. Sound good? Okay. In that case, I proudly present D&D Build number 171. I can do this all day. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he created for this build. He does this every week. If you'd be interested in following him to check out the other stuff that he's done, or maybe even commissioning him to create some art for your character or your entire party even, I will put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. Okay, guys, you've heard about DC20, right? The new TTRPG system that just launched on Kickstarter, created by my really good friend Alan, aka the Dungeon Coach. I mean, everybody's talking about this system. Treant Monk, One-Shot Questers, Bob World Builder, Will from D&D Shorts, Mr. Rex, and many more. And there's a reason. It's because the game system is freaking fantastic. I should know. I played it. Check out that video here if you didn't see the one-shot. And yeah, the Kickstarter just launched for this game system, and I really think you should check it out. Let me tell you my 3 favorite things about DC20. Number 1, the rolls matter more. In DC20, it's not a simple hit, miss, or crit system. The higher you roll and the better you can stack your hit chance, the more damage you can potentially do. So you're incentivized to get that hit chance as high as possible, since even if you don't crit, if you beat an enemy's defenses by enough, you're still going to do more damage. I love that. 2, monks are awesome. And not just monks, honestly. Martial characters in general, I think, feel a lot more powerful in this system than they do in 5e. Not that casters are slouches or anything, they definitely aren't, but yeah, I really loved how powerful my monk felt, and right at level 1 too, with some really great and fun options to play with right out of the gate, so that I didn't feel like the first few levels were just kind of a slog waiting to get to my more powerful features, right? And number 3, you can have a strength-based wizard, or might in this system. And yeah, you would use your might to impact your spellcasting, as though you were just empowering your spells through the force of your presence and power rather than your intellect. You don't have to, but you can. Every character gets to choose not just their class, but also what that class's main attribute is going to be for their character. And this just opens up a huge variety of ways that you can customize your character to your heart's delight, really letting you build exactly the kind of character that you want without having to suffer mechanically to do so. You want a barbarian who's powerful in combat because of how charismatic they are? Done. And you don't even have to take a hexblade dip to pull it off. But don't think that this makes for like a loosey-goosey super rules light system. It doesn't. It has just the right amount of crunch, while still focusing heavily on the social and exploration aspects of the game in addition to combat. And yeah, for TTRPG veterans, it's going to feel both familiar but also fresh. You're going to be able to pick up and play it without having to spend a ton of hours learning it first. I seriously spent like maybe 30 to 40 minutes reading and chatting with Alan before our first session, and I was ready to go. So seriously, you guys, go check out DC20 and back this project. The core rulebook is a gorgeous 300-page masterpiece, but if you back it now, you're going to get access to the beta so that you can help put the finishing touches on the system before it goes to print. Help them reach their stretch goals, if they haven't yet, that is. I'm recording this before launch. So we can get the Spellblade class added. That's a stretch goal. Please, a dedicated Gish class, come on. There are other goodies available only to Kickstarter backers as well, of course, so do not delay. You don't have much time. Go to the link in the video description, and it's also in the pinned comment so that they know I sent you, please. And thank you. Huge thanks to DC20 and Alan for sponsoring this video. Alan, you're awesome. This system is going to be so great. I cannot wait to see the finished product. All right. let's get back to the build. Okay, first up, build number 1, if you're stopping at level 9 or 10 or maybe even earlier, like I've said, for this one, you're going to want to start Barbarian as our starting class. And honestly, it's for one main reason that we'll talk about in a minute. As for our race, surprising no one, yeah, we're gonna go, well, Variant Human. In my best builds for every level video, I got a lot of comments about my heavy use of custom lineage Variant Human, like I do almost every time I use them, I suppose. Some people are just angry that it's so good, maybe, and they find it boring or unchallenging to use this race. To those people, I guess I would say, I get it. Sometimes it feels lame to take the obvious choice, right? But also, in these instances, I'm just trying to find the limit of what's possible numerically, right? I'm not necessarily trying to be a special, unique flower. And also, I do a lot of builds that are higher on uniqueness, where I build for a certain race, like the Thri-kreen and the Praying Mantis build, or where I just build around a certain concept and hold myself to strict rules. And in those instances and in others, then getting a free feat might be a little less important. Some of the commenters, though, wanted me to use a different race because a lot of tables already give a free feat. I mean, they even do that in Adventure League, right? So why not just assume that we're getting a free feat and take a different race? And I guess while sure, a lot of tables, even Adventure League, do get free feats at level 1, I think it's safe to say that the majority still don't. Or at the very least, it's complicated. Like they get a free feat, but they're limited in their choice, or it has to be thematically appropriate, etc. If the results from the poll I did a couple of weeks ago are any indication, at least. So anyways, yes, we're taking Variant Human because a free feat is just so good, so often, especially when we need a feat or two to get the most out of our build. I will say, though, that if you do get a free feat at your table and can choose any feat you want, then yeah, go ahead and take Half-Orc here. They're pretty solid. Getting Dark Vision, Relentless Endurance is nice, but then for damage purposes, Savage Attacks, which is essentially the same thing as the Barbarian's Brutal Critical, letting you add an extra die in weapon damage when you crit. It's not a huge increase in damage, honestly, but it does just work every time you crit, and so will add to our like all-day sustainable damage, right? Plus, I mean, a Half-Orc Barbarian, come on, that's a combo so classic, it's like peaches and cream. Very angry peaches and cream, I suppose. Peaches, 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 I love you. Oh. Okay, as for the free feat that we would get, you know where we're going, Polearm Master. It lets us make an opportunity attack when an enemy enters our reach, not just leaves it, and then, most importantly, lets us get a bonus action attack with the butt of our polearm when we take the attack action and make a sharp end attack first, right? The blunt end just does a D4, but that's okay. It still adds our strength modifier and any other modifiers we might get from our weapon as well. Super strong. As for our ability scores, I'm assuming we're going the point by method as always and say, let's start with a 15 strength and +1 from Variant Human there, 14 constitution, a 14 dexterity, and then a 12 charisma, +1 there. I bet you didn't see that charisma coming, huh? Admittedly, I'd much rather have a decent wisdom score if I were trying to build something more well-rounded, but I'm not. Damage and damage only. What's possible? So, yes, charisma it is. For equipment here, you're going to want to go the gold buy route and then pick up some scale mail and, a polearm, either a halberd or a glaive. As a Barbarian 1, we get unarmed defense. This tells us that if we are unarmored, our AC is equal to 10 plus our dexterity plus our constitution. But our stats aren't high enough for that to be better than just wearing medium armor with a +2 from our dexterity, right? So don't fall for it. It's a trap. We also get Rage as a Barbarian 1, and usually this is a really important feature for Barbarians. And I mean, if you were playing this character in game, it would be important for you too. But since it's a limited resource that takes a bonus action to use, I can't rely on it for all-day damage with this build. If and when you do use it, it'll add a couple of points of damage to your strength-based melee attacks, so long as you're not wearing heavy armor, and it'll also give you resistance to all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which is pretty fantastic. I'm not going to assume, though, that we have Rage activated when I crunch numbers, but know that this means that you'll often do even more damage than I report on. Hooray for sandbagging. At level 2, we get Danger Sense, which lets us have advantage on dexterity saves, basically, and then Reckless Attack. And this is the main reason we've started Barbarian, and it is the #1 thing that makes Barbarians so good. at early levels. It's really difficult to overestimate the power of Reckless Attack, especially in a world where Great Weapon Master with its -5 to hit plus 10 to damage exists, right? When you crunch the numbers, having advantage is just so incredibly powerful, and the higher the enemy armor class gets, the more powerful it becomes. And while, sure, there are a lot of ways to get advantage in D&D 5e, none of them are as reliable as Reckless Attack. It just works. Enemies don't get to save against it. You don't have to spend any resources to use it, nor can you only use it a limited number of times per day. There's no setup required, a bonus action to spend, no concentration cost. You just have advantage whenever you want, period. It's so good. Now, of course, it has drawbacks too. First of all, it only works when you make melee strength-based attacks. So ranged weapon users and non-strength-based damage dealers need not apply. Also, of course, when you use it, then enemy attacks against you have advantage until your next turn, right? And that is a fairly steep cost, sure, but it tends to be strongly tempered by the resistance that barbarians get against most damage, or practically all damage if you're a bear totem barbarian, right? In the form of rage. But for this build, where we're not assuming that we're raging, it's even more costly to use Reckless Attack. Of course, that's not to say that you couldn't rage while playing this character in an actual game, and I have to believe that most of you will be most of, if not all of, the time. Still, with only medium armor and wielding a two-handed weapon, so no shield, right? If you can't be raging, for whatever reason, you might actually want to think twice about Reckless Attacking. Depending on the fight, depending on if it's round 1 and you're at full health, or round 5 and you're almost dead, right? I would argue, however, that because of how strong it is, and especially if we can be raging, you should be Reckless Attacking like 95% of the time. I see people play Barbarian sometimes and kind of agonize over whether or not they should attack recklessly. To you, I would say, it's not really much of a decision. Just use it. Kill your enemies before they can kill you. In D&D 5e especially, thanks to action economy, most of the time, a good offense wins combat encounters more reliably than a good defense. All right, at level 3, we get our Barbarian subclass, our Primal Path, and here's the thing about Barbarian subclasses. I think, like, the main feature for every single one of them give you a buff at level 3 that does something when you're raging. Some get an additional ribbon feature as well, but nothing to increase damage. Since I'm not assuming that we are raging, then the subclass really doesn't give us any benefit when I crunch the numbers, right? Once again, here's a situation where your experience will potentially be much better than the numbers I report on. If you wanted to do the best sustained damage possible at as early a level as possible, I'd go with Zealot. I think Zealot's my most used Barbarian subclass though, so let's pick Giant here instead since it's new and shiny and I've hardly used it. And it is arguably the best subclass for damage when you rage, if you get to Barbarian 6 at least. As a Giant Barbarian then, we get Giant's Power. This lets us know the Giant language and either the Druid or Thaumaturgy cantrip. And then we get Giant's Havoc, which simply lets us, when raging, add our range damage to our thrown weapon attacks using Strength. Frustratingly, it doesn't let us attack recklessly still on thrown weapon attacks, which makes it really difficult to justify a thrown weapon Barbarian build. Rage is good, but Reckless Attack is much, much better. Kind of talked about that in the Giant Barbarian build that I did a few months ago. This feature also increases our size to large and our reach by 5 feet. And I just really like the idea of a large barbarian with polearm master who gets a 15-foot reach. Hardly anyone is going to be able to get past you. I mean, make yourself a bugbear and have an ally cast the enlarge spell on you and like take the sentinel feat, and you would be a pretty fantastic battlefield controller. At level 4, we get an ability score increase or feat, and we're taking Great Weapon Master, of course, which, as I've said, lets us add 10 damage to our heavy weapon attacks at the cost of a -5 to hit. 10 damage is a lot. It's better than 2d8 on average. A -5 to hit hurts a lot, but it hurts a lot less with Reckless Attack. A Great Weapon Master also tells us that if we crit or kill an enemy, we can make a bonus action attack with our weapon, which is a lot nicer if we don't have Polearm Master. As it is, it's just going to mean that sometimes our bonus action attack will be a d10 instead of a d4. Not nothing, but not a huge deal either. At level 5, we get fast movement, increasing our move speed by 10 feet if we're not wearing heavy armor, and then most importantly, we get extra attack so that we can attack twice with the sharp end, once with the butt, for 3 Great Weapon Master infused attacks every single round. Now, at level 6, if you went Giant for your subclass, and you actually were using Rage in game, which of course you are, then I would go Barbarian here for the extra damage bump that Giant Barbarians get while raging. You might have gone Zealot, in which case, level 6 isn't as important. Regardless, for us, it's not going to show up on the spreadsheet because rage is a limited use resource that takes a bonus action to use, so yeah, there's not a lot that's motivating me to stay in Barbarian at this point. Like I said, they scale about as poorly as any class in game. Maybe second only to monks, but maybe worse. So yeah, in the interest of maximizing damage while sticking to my rules, I'm gonna say, let's go, no, not fighter, warlock. Yay, curveballs. Fighter is, of course, a classic pairing for barbarians. Fighting style, action surge, cool subclass stuff. But if we're truly just interested in resource-free sustained damage above all, I mean, the most we'd get from fighter would be a crappy fighting style in great weapon fighting and a crappy subclass in champion. Neither of those are going to do as much for us as warlock. And this is why I needed that 13 charisma, so let's dig in. First and foremost, at Warlock 1, we get our Warlock subclass, our Otherworldly Patron, and we're not going Hexblade. We're going with the true best Warlock subclass, Genie. Genies get to choose their Genie kind, and I'm just going to say, pick your favorite here. I don't much care, though Dao does tend to be the strongest, I think. And then we get a cool magic lamp or ring or other vessel that our Genie resides in. We can visit them there too, once a day. But the main draw for this build, of course, is the Genie's Wrath feature, which simply tells us that once per turn, when we hit an enemy with an attack, we can add our proficiency bonus in damage. With that damage taking the form of the Genie kind we selected, right? So bludgeoning for Dao, thunder for Jin, etc. And yeah, no limit to how often this can happen. No need for us to do anything to set it up. It's just extra damage once per turn. Always and forever. We get Warlock spells here too, and go ahead and PYF, pick your favorite. Since I'm not assuming that we're going to be using any of them in combat, in that case, and thanks to our low charisma, maybe focus on things that don't rely on a good charisma to work, right? Armor of Agathis for a little extra health and to return cold damage to enemies who hit you. I mean, maybe Hex if you're in a boss fight and you're out of rage uses for the day. Anyways, stuff like that. At level 6, it is time for our first damage report. Combat, of course, is pretty simple. We're an I can do this all day kind of character. When combat breaks out, we run up to our target and attack recklessly 3 times, twice with the blade, once with the butt. We apply our +3 modifier to damage from strength each time and +10 from Great Weapon Master, +3 more from Genie's Wrath on the first attack that hits. The end. And so, against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 48 DPR. And against a 15 AC, it's 34 damage per round. And we wouldn't be turning off Great Weapon Master until an enemy of AC 19 or higher, thanks really to Reckless Attack. And you know what? That's some seriously solid damage. Surprise, Great Weapon Master times 3 attacks with advantage is really good, right? Compared to other sustained damage builds I've done to date, if we're looking at just attacks against ACs you're likely going to be fighting, maybe in and around 15 AC, right? I'd call it comparable to other tier 3 builds. At lower enemy ACs, it's closer to tier 2 or maybe even tier 1. But unlike any build that I've done to date, you can do it all day long. No setup, no resources, and that's pretty dang solid. Some of those other builds are getting really jealous right now. Okay, at level 7, we're going to stick with Warlock. I know, I'm just as surprised as you are. That's going to give us, so we'd be in a Warlock 2, that's going to give us Eldritch Invocations, right? Nothing here that we're going to need for our sustained damage, so go ahead and grab stuff for utility purposes like Double Sight. Variant humans don't have Dark Vision, so that's actually pretty nice. Fiendish Vigor can give us some temporary hit points at will if we don't have a spell slot for Armor of Agathis anyways, stuff like that. At level 8, we would be a Warlock 3, and we get our Pact Boon, and we're going to want to go with Pact of the Blade, of course. It lets us magically summon a weapon, whether one we're creating out of thin air or a magical one that we've previously bonded if we have a magical weapon at this point. The main reason for taking this pact, of course, is because it means that we can swap one of our invocations for improved pact weapon. I'd probably keep Devil Sight, I think, personally, but then, yeah, improved pact weapon makes our weapon a +1 magic weapon. Now, you may already have that in-game, or even better at this point, but I have no way of knowing that. Creating this build in a lab like I am, and a +1 to hit and damage is going to do nice things for our numbers. We would also get second level Warlock spells here, and again, pick your favorites. Some options worth considering might be Cloud of Daggers, Darkness, Misty Step, Invisibility, and Spider Climb, as none of those are affected one way or another by our Charisma modifier, but all are potentially very handy. At level 9, it makes sense to stick with Warlock. We're stopping this build at this level, right? And one more level is going to give us an ability score increase or feat, and that means we get to bump our strength to 18, which really is the best thing that we can do for our sustained damage at the moment. At level 9, it is time for our next damage report. Since last check, the only real increases we've seen to our damage are a bump to our strength and another +1 from improved pact weapon. And while the total gains that we've seen from 4 levels of Warlock aren't massive, it's pretty telling that our damage here with Warlock 4 is still a lot better than it would have been if we just stuck with Barbarian. In which case, really the only thing that would increase our damage is a very lackluster brutal critical feature. Like I said, terrible scaling. Again though, if we're raging, Giant Barbarian would have been worth sticking with until at least level 6, but I'm building as per my rules, so here we are. And yeah, let's not forget that we actually have gotten some decent survivability and or utility options from Warlock as well, which will help the character be a little more versatile and fun to play, I think. Anyways, here, against an enemy with a 10 AC, we would on average do 60 damage per round, and against a 16 armor class, it would be 46 DPR. And yeah, a fairly minor increase compared to other sustained builds that I've done to date at this level, and maybe especially emphasizing that 16 AC plus or minus a couple of points. We're kind of more like tier 3 or even tier 4 now, which doesn't surprise me too much. Barbarian up through level 5 is super solid. After that, not so much, and there aren't a ton of other classes we can reach out to here for truly sustained damage increases with just a 3 or 4 level dip and not spending any resources, right? This brings us to the end of what I'm going to call the first version of this build, the early game to mid game version of the build, meant more for like tier 1, tier 2 play. If I were playing this character in this way, in game, from this point on, if we continued to level, I think I'd either keep going Warlock to eventually get to things like Life Drinker, or maybe start investing in Fighter to eventually, at character level 20 anyways, get to Fighter 11 for that third attack. And speaking of fighters, yeah, let's talk about how I would change this build if I were more interested in the level 10 and beyond damage, whether because I was starting the campaign at a higher level or simply because I wanted to reach a greater maximum damage potential in the later stages of a campaign that was going to get into the higher levels eventually, right? Really quick, before moving on, I just wanted to give a shout out and thank you to my channel members. You guys, I could not do this without you. Thank you. You are so awesome. Everybody else, you are also awesome. But I would appreciate it if you'd consider joining the channel as a member. There's a button down there. Click on it. It says join. It'll just tell you like how much it costs. It's not very much, and what benefits are available. Things like access to the write-ups that I do for each one of these builds so that you can more easily recreate it yourself later, right? Access to the D4 community Discord server filled with lots of wonderful, lovely people, and even access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do. If you can't or don't want to become a member, that's okay. Just watching, liking, subscribing, clicking the notifications bell, commenting. These are all great ways to support the channel too. So thanks for just doing even those things. Really quickly, housekeeping item. I have a huge surprise for you guys, and I can't say anything more than that, but make sure that you are ready to jump on the video that comes out June 18th, because it's gonna be a good one. Anyways, there are a lot of similarities between the builds, but the major difference is that at level 1, I would start Fighter, right? And either beeline for level 11, or maybe take a quick pause along the way for a Barbarian dip. We'll discuss as we go. For our race, again, Variant Human, or maybe Half Orc if you get a free feat. Abilities are gonna be the same, 15 strength +1, 14 con, 14 dex, 12 charisma +1. Free feats the same, polearm master. Equipment, slightly different. We're going to use chainmail here, along with the Glaver halberd. I mean, it's not actually any difference between going scale mail +2 from dex, but once we can get plate armor, sure, you're going to have a better armor class. As a fighter 1, we get second wind. This lets us heal ourselves with a bonus action once per short rest for a d10 plus our fighter levels. And then we get a fighting style. And even though I appreciate that it's a pretty lackluster fighting style, Great Weapon Fighting Style is the only thing that will increase our sustained damage, letting us reroll any 1s or 2s that we roll for weapon damage, right? On average for us, that's going to be like 1 point of damage or so. So yeah, nothing huge, but I'm trying to eke out every point I can here, so that's what I'll assume we're doing. At level 2, we get Action Surge, but we're not going to assume that it's ever being used. When you do, it'll bring some nice burst damage, as it lets us, once per short rest, take 2 actions on a turn instead of 1. At level 3, we get our Martial Archetype, our fighter subclass, and while it is one of my least favorite fighter subclasses, Champion is, I think, the only one that can give us a truly sustainable damage increase that doesn't cost any resources, right? I mean, please, if you're playing this character, maybe unless it's like your very first D&D character, but maybe even then, don't go Champion. It's so boring. Battlemaster or Rune Knight or Echo Knight or Eldritch Knight or Psy Warrior, or almost anything, honestly, is better. But hey, champion does give us improved critical, which tells us that we crit on a 19 or 20 instead of just a 20, and that's just always on. All the time. It's a pretty minor bump to our average damage, but it is a bump. And none of those other subclasses give us something this reliable that's always on, so we'll take it. At level 4, we get an ability score increase or feat. Of course, we're going Great Weapon Master again. At level 5, we get extra attack again. We know how good that is. At level 6, fighters get another feat. Arguably the best thing about fighters. So many feats, at least until we hit level 11. We're going to want to bump strength, of course, as that's the best thing that we can do for our sustained damage. I'm not going to bother with a damage report here. It's not going to be as good at level 6 going this route as it would have been had we gone Barbarian, thanks mostly to our lack of reliable advantage. But I think at level 7, maybe even at level 6, if I were playing this character from level 1, I'd take a detour into Barbarian here. I hate to delay Fighter 11, I do, but once we get extra attack, getting Reckless Attack from Barbarian is really going to be the best thing for our damage. So yeah, Barbarian 1, we get Unarmored Defense, we get Rage. Something worth noting, while Reckless Attack does work if you're wearing heavy armor, remember that Rage does not. You'll probably want to switch from heavy armor to medium armor here, even if it means losing 1 AC, right? Going from plate to half plate plus 2 dexterity is going to be 1 less armor class. But yeah, knowing that this was probably going to happen, that's why I wanted to get to a 14 dex even on this build, right? In addition, of course, to bumping that dexterity saving throw and my initiative, of course. No, I will not account for rage damage in the damage reports, but obviously you'll want to use it when you can, and getting resistance to most damage you'll be taking while raging will more than make up for the loss of 1 armor class when it comes to survivability, right? At level 8, we'd be a Barbarian 2, we get Danger Sense again, and Reckless Attack again. Yeah, I mean, my original plan for the fighter version of this build was to go ranged, Sharpshooter, Crossbow Expert, instead of Polearm Master and Great Weapon Master, thinking once we got to Fighter 11, we could start adding some rogue levels for some scaling sneak attack damage once per turn. But even though ranged weapon users benefit from the best fighting style in the game, archery, which gives a +2 to hit, and that's huge when we're trying to counteract a -5 to hit, right? When you crunch the numbers, +2 to hit, and even adding sneak attack damage just is not good as having advantage when we have a -5 to hit plus 10 to damage feat. Not at most enemy armor classes, at least. And again, the only way to get reliable, consistent, whenever you want it, advantage is via Reckless Attack, and that means melee strength-based attacks. Sorry to be boring. I don't make the rules, I just understand them. Okay, at level 9, getting a Barbarian subclass might be neat in practice, but I wouldn't want to delay Fighter 11 any further, so it's back to Fighter we go. We'd be a Fighter 7, and that means as a champion we get Remarkable Athlete, which is super remarkable. Kinda. It's basically Jack of all trades, but only for our physical attributes, right? If we make a strength, dex, or con check that doesn't use our proficiency already, we can add half our proficiency bonus to the check. That should include initiative, though, if I'm not mistaken, so it's not terrible. It also lets us jump farther. As an aside, I'll mention, if you're watching this video after the new Player's Handbook comes out later this year, I'd want to have taken Eldritch Knight for my subclass. I mean, I'd want to do that regardless, but it looks like they're going to give Eldritch Knights the same attack as Blade Singers with the new Player's Handbook, letting them replace one of their attacks with a cantrip, meaning you could, on your second attack, right, Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade, and that would be a better sustained damage increase than we get from champion. Okay, moving on. Again, I'm not going to do a damage report for level 9. It's worse than version 1 of the build still, but from here, things are going to start getting better. So level 10, we'd be a Fighter 8, and that means we get another ability score increase or feat, letting us cap that strength score at 20. Very nice. At level 11, we would be a Fighter 9, and that means we get Indomitable, which is pretty terrible. Again, at least until the new Player's Handbook comes out later this year. It just says that once per day, we can re-roll a failed save. If you're likely to fail that save again, probably don't use this. Saving it instead for something you're likely to succeed on, but you just rolled terribly. Yeah. Okay, at level 12, we would be a Fighter 10, and that means as a champion we get an additional fighting style. And I'm gonna just say pick your favorite here. There's nothing that's going to increase our damage, but Superior Technique could give us a fun Battle Master maneuver to use once per turn. Interception is a nice supportive style, reducing damage to nearby allies, right? Defense is gonna increase our AC, nothing to increase our sustained damage, so take what looks best. At level 13, we would be a Fighter 11, and this is the true promised land, and the thing that makes this version of the build so much better than the first version once we got to this point, because it means that we get the unique to fighters extra attack, letting us make 3 attacks on our turn when we take the attack action, giving us a total of 4 attacks each turn outside of our action surge rounds, right? All infused with that sweet plus 10 damage from Great Weapon Master. Okay, we haven't done a level 13 damage report yet, so let's do that now, shall we? Combat is, again, incredibly simple for this version of the build as well. On your turn, you run up to your nearest enemy and you hit them 4 times. 3 times with the sharp end, plus 1 butt action attack. We have advantage, thanks to Reckless Attack, a capped strength score, a small bump from the Great Weapon Fighting style. We crit on a 19, and that's about it. But each successful attack will add 15 damage to the hit. So we've got some really great, reliable damage. And so, against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 83 damage per round, and against a 17 AC, it would be 61 DPR. And that is significantly better than where we would have been with the Barbarian 5 route, thanks to that 3rd attack with our attack action mostly. Compared to other sustained damage builds that I've done to date at this level, we're again kind of tier 3, tier 4 range. Not bad for damage that you can truly do all day, though, right? Okay, at level 14, I mean, sure, we could stick with Fighter, but we don't get a lot out of it aside from more feats, and that's not nothing, but there aren't a lot of feats that would improve our sustained damage, right? At level 20 Fighter, we'd get an amazing 4th attack with the attack action, sure, but I only take these builds to 17, and Reckless Attack is worth giving up that 4th attack for, honestly. So now that we've gotten at least to 3 attacks with the attack action, let's do what we did in the other build and grab some Warlock levels. So yeah, we'd be a Warlock 1 here, Otherworldly Patron's Genie, we get the same features, Bottle Respite, Genie's Wrath, spells, same thing, focus on things that don't rely on your charisma, like Armor of Agathis, etc. At level 15, we would be a Warlock 2, Eldritch Invocation, same thing, take probably Devil's Sight, maybe Fiendish Vigor. Level 16, we'd be a Warlock 3. You get your Pact Boon, we're taking Pact of the Blade, we're swapping our Invocation for improved Pact Weapon, right? But I guess I should say, sure, the likelihood that you're playing a martial character at level 16 without a magic weapon that's better than +1 is really infinitesimally small outside of maybe low magic campaigns. And so this potentially lessens the value of going more than 1 level into Warlock. Now, I can see plenty of DMs saying, you know what, yeah, if you have improved Pact Weapon, I'm going to let you add that +1 to your weapon, even if it's already a magic weapon. In fact, raise your hand in the comments if that's how it would go down at your table. Anyways, with that in mind, there is an argument, sure, to be made for taking a better Wisdom score instead of Charisma at character creation, and then getting 3+ levels of Ranger here instead of Warlock. Hunter Rangers get to add a D8 to their damage once per turn, so long as the target isn't at full health, and that's very sustainable, right? But thanks to the minimum ability score requirements, it would be pretty tough to get both Ranger and Warlock and still have our strength and our constitution in a good place. So you kind of have to choose between one or the other, and since Genie's Wrath adds our proficiency bonus to damage, and pretty soon that's going to be 6, that's better than a D8, right? With a much smaller investment. So yeah, I'd just as soon stick Warlock, personally. So yeah, at this level we do get 2nd level spells again. Pick your favorites: Clouded Daggers, Darkness, Misty Step, Invisibility, Spider Climb. But then finally for us, at level 17, I suppose I'd go back to Fighter. You get more hit points as a Fighter than you do as a Warlock, and whether we're Fighter 12 or Warlock 5, we're just getting an ability score increase or feat here, right? The only one I can really think of to improve our sustained do this all day damage at this point is the fairly lackluster Savage Attacker. Again, don't know that I'd take this in any build that wasn't strictly trying to figure out the most all-day damage possible, but the feat does let you re-roll your weapon damage rolls, so if you get a crappy roll, sure, you can re-roll it. Now, it might not be super clear on how this would interact with the Great Weapon Fighting style, right, that we already have, which already lets us re-roll 1s and 2s, but without getting too into the weeds, Jeremy Crawford has said that Great Weapon Fighting would let you re-roll 1s and 2s even if you already had re-rolled something thanks to Savage Attacker, since Great Weapon Fighter doesn't have the once per turn restriction that Savage Attacker does. So you hit your target, you roll your weapon damage. If that roll sucks, re-roll it again thanks to Savage Attacker. If you get a 1 or a 2, re-roll it again thanks to Great Weapon Fighting style, and then you have to use the new roll. Again, it's a really small damage increase, but it's something, and it works all day. And so, for our final damage report. since last check, we've just gained some small bumps from Genie Warlock, 6 damage once per turn, a +1 to hit and damage, and then an even smaller bump from Savage Attacker. And so, against a 10 armor class, we would here on average do 100 damage per round. We broke the century mark, if just barely. And against an 18 AC, it would be 78 DPR. So yeah, I mean, that's awesome. If we land all of our attacks, we're regularly going to break 100 damage per round. And compared to other sustained damage builds that I've done to date, at this level, we're in about the same place. Tier 3, Tier 4, depending on the AC. And considering the reliability and the ease of this damage, I feel pretty dang good about it. All right. Let's wrap it up here with some final thoughts. The tier score for this build, if you take the damage that they do against all the armor classes that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports, and just average them all into one number, we come up with a nice even 50. That feels super appropriate, honestly. And 50 lands us very near the top of tier 4. It's a fraction of a point from being bottom of tier 3. So yeah, let's discuss. I mean, on the one hand, thank goodness most characters aren't like this, right? Anyone who has played a character who just does the exact same thing in every combat encounter on every turn figures out pretty quickly that it can get a little boring. But on the other hand, isn't it great to know that maybe especially if you don't really care about combat all that much at your table and are more interested in the roleplay and the exploration and story aspects of D&D, that you can build a character who can just reliably make massive contributions to combat encounters without having to think about it too much or try very hard. Plus, sure, there are plenty of things that this character brings to the party outside of just all-day damage, right? Some fun spell options, utility and versatility stuff, there's burst damage capabilities, and there's no reason you couldn't tweak things slightly to add even more variety. Make yourself a Rune Knight or a Battlemaster fighter instead, and have some fun and powerful things to do in combat once in a while. Get super into your
I become a hulking giant when I rage
roll and play it up. Maybe sacrifice a little damage to be tankier. Or, like I said, add the Sentinel feat to stop enemies in their tracks all the time and really kind of lock down the battlefield. Some very minor adjustments to this build will have a fairly insignificant impact to your damage, but give you a lot more versatility and power that doesn't necessarily show up in the spreadsheets, but will make combat a lot more interesting, engaging, and fun. What's more, the damage I'm showing is definitely lower than what you are going to experience in the game most of the time, right? You're going to be raging. If you've got a barbarian subclass, that could become an even more significant bump. You even have spells you could potentially use to bolster your damage. And yeah, like we've said, a much better fighter subclass too. So considering that we ended up on a tier score of 50 is really kind of amazing to me. There are a lot of builds that fall below this. At the time of this recording, 23 of them to be exact. Now, to be fair, the vast majority of those were either severely hamstrung by me trying to stick to like a strict character concept, imposing artificial restrictions on the build in the name of concept, right? Like the Street Fighter or the Ice and Artifice build, etc. Am I out of cards? Or they were bringing something else really potent to the fight, like strong battlefield control in the case of the Battlesmith controller. Okay, I'm just gonna point over here because then you can at least see the thumbnail. Or the Undead Support Lock. Or they were building around a really underpowered subclass like the Alchemist Artificer or the Sun Soul Monk. So yeah, I'd expect to be above those builds in damage and then below most others. And I think that's pretty much where we ended up. So I'm super satisfied. I'm also just really pleased to have established what feels to me like a nice optimized baseline that I can compare my other builds against. Regardless though, I think this would be a fantastic character to play in game. I really do. Maybe especially for a newbie, but a veteran could have a lot of fun with it too, especially with some tweaks like I've mentioned. Anyways, that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you know how much I love you. You guys are so awesome. Thank you so much for all that you do, for me, for the channel. I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week. I hope that you will do good and be kind and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Okay, fine. Maybe 2 videos with the man bun, and then I'm cutting my hair. I'm probably cutting my hair. I don't know. It's growing on me. The man bun. I mean, not the hair. Dad joke. One dad joke down. Whew. Getting started early today. I'm thinking it's a sign that the freckles in our eyes are mirror images, and when we kiss they're perfectly aligned. And I have to speculate that God himself did make us into corresponding shapes like puzzle pieces from the clay. They will see us waving from such great heights. Come down now, they'll say. But everything looks perfect from far away. Come down now, but we'll stay. All right, best version of the song. Let's just put it to rest right here, right now. Postal Service or Iron and Wine? And I'm sorry, I gotta go with Iron and Wine. Like, I know the M&M commercial, and I know Postal Service. You gotta give props to the original, but I think he took it from kind of a more poppy, techno-y song to like a real slow, ballady love song, and I'm here for it. I think it works. I think it works better, and yeah, that's a hill that I'm willing to die on.
Hey everybody, Blackthorn here from the editing room. I usually don't interject myself into Colby's videos, but he did ask a question. The only other time I do that is if he has made an egregious mistake, and unfortunately, in today's video, he's done both. Okay, in all seriousness, he posed the question, what is the superior version of the song? Is it the Iron and Wine version? Is it the Postal Service version? And there's no dig against Iron and Wine. They're great. Chef's kiss. But maybe it's the elder millennial in me. The correct answer is the Postal Service. I love Benjamin Gibbard so much. Maybe, like I said, it's that elder millennial. I don't know. But sorry, Colby, you're wrong. And it is my job, my sworn duty as the editor. I said duty. Sworn oath of the editor to, keep you in check. Anyways. And yeah, in the comments, a lot of you have been saying, hey, your videos aren't an hour long anymore. What's going on? Well, yeah, that's my fault. I've been editing him down and trimming him down. So this is maybe my way of saying, sorry, the video might be a little bit longer if I include this in there. It's an old YouTube editing trick. Pad the runtime. Anyways, back to Colby doing silly stuff in his outtakes. Bye.
Okay, today we're going to see if we can do a whole video where the camera just focuses on me and not the dragon. Oh, it's so tempting, so seductive. All right, I think that's good. Sometimes it's hard to tell. That's the problem. When I'm just looking at it, I think I'm in focus, but then I end up being wrong a lot of the time, and I'm blurry for half the video. Oh, how we do? Dragon? I think I'm still in focus. Maybe. Oh, that's better. But see, back up. It just loses me. Don't know why. Oh, there it goes. Screw it. I am going to have to figure out how to just force this camera to be focused on something. Maybe I'll see if I can do that right now real quick.
5 years later.
Well, that was a big waste of time. Stupid. All right, well, screw it. Just gotta keep going. All right, time to do ad spot for DC20. Ooh, I can bring this guy's flat. This guy's sharp. Whatever. Okay. Okay. No to the dragon. Just say no to dragon. Anyways, here, that's so freaking cocky. We're regularly gonna break 100 armor class.